Good afternoon. This is Joe Forward, legal writer for the State Bar of Wisconsin. And today I'm with Jarrett Adams. Many of you have likely heard his story. He was wrongly convicted as a 17-year-old and served about 10 years in prison before his release through the Wisconsin Innocence Project. And today he's a lawyer, and I'm here to chat with him about his experience and to get his views on what's happening right now in terms of protesting and Black Lives Matter and calls for reform in the criminal justice system. Jarrett, thanks so much for being with us today.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate being on.
So Jarrett, for those who may not know your story, can you tell the listeners and the viewers about your wrongful conviction and take us through what happened there?
Yeah. So I'm a 17-year-old kid, me and a couple friends, grew up, born and raised on the south side of Chicago. And, you know, I know a lot of people who have similar stories like myself. You know, they start and they say, well, you know, look, I was a troubled kid, or I was in the streets, or none of us ever had that story, right? We all had structured families. We had all attended high school. The two of my friends that I came up with, you know, they were both, one was on his way to college, the other one was working a job looking at college, and I was just graduating high school, getting ready to enter into junior college myself. We would oftentimes get in the car and go out of our neighborhood to go party and stuff like that, because we weren't gangbangers, we weren't drug dealers, but trouble finds you all the time in the city of Chicago. And I'm sure that people looking and listening right now can just take a look down at the news in Chicago and see the violence, the shooting, and how it just seems like it's just all over the place. So we got in the car, drove to Wisconsin. We used the classic alibi defense that everyone has used as a kid. I told my parents I was spending the night over their house, and they told their parents they were spending the night over my house. We go to a party. You know, the things at this party that was going on have been going on at college campuses with drinking and underage kids forever, right? And it's still going on. We ultimately were falsely accused of a sexual assault that the police and investigators never wanted to believe that we were innocent, which was really the biggest deal about it. And then also, it came down to the representation. I, along with one co-defendant, was given a public defender. My other co-defendant was able to hire an attorney, and he never spent the day in jail after we were able to go through the case and realize that police and investigators were withholding an alibi statement that undermined the entire accusations in the case. After being sentenced, working on my own case, I was able to get the assistance of the Wisconsin Innocence Project. They came, argued my case all the way up to the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, where the court unanimously reversed my conviction, and I was released after almost 10 years in prison.
Wow. So as a young African-American man, in going in through the justice system, what was that like? I mean, what was your perception as a 17-year-old kid going through the system like that? And how did that shape, you know, who you are now?
So it's had a profound effect on who I am. I mean, I liken it to a car crash. If several people are in a car crash, people come out with different ailments, right? My back might hurt, someone else's neck might hurt, someone else might not be physically hurt, but they might just be fearful of ever getting in the car again. I left too with those ailments of going through this experience. But through therapy, through family, I've been able to sit down and find a way to channel my frustration and anger into the fuel that's driving me to do what I'm doing now. I had a limited experience with the law, which was basically law and order as a kid. Most kids and people from impoverished areas, they don't have any real experience with the law until it's too late. It's not being taught as a curriculum inside of our schools. Most of the kids come from this area, like my area. We don't get the clerkships with the judges and stuff like that inside of our neighborhoods, and our only interactions with authorities are harmful ones. And so when I was going through this, I had the unrealistic, naive expectation that the criminal justice system would give me the same presumption of innocence as it does my counterparts. And that's just simply not the case.
Right. And so now as a lawyer, how has your experience shaped who you are as a lawyer in terms of how you represent people in the cases you choose to take? I mean, how has that experience impacted your practice?
So I'm able to see the courtroom from both sides of the table, if that makes sense. I understand what it's like to be a client having no knowledge about what's going on and wanting to understand, but too afraid to look dumb by asking a question. So I take the opportunity to break down everything, not just to my clients, but also when given the ethical permission to break it down to my client's family as well. One of the scariest things in dealing with the criminal justice system is not knowing the outcome, right? Not knowing, not having an understanding about how things will work. And so I can remember, looking in the courtroom, hearing things, and looking at my attorney during trial, wanting an explanation, only for him to tell me, don't worry about it. So it's stuff like that I think that is very harmful. And so within my practice, I make sure that I'm very painstakingly thorough in explaining to people what it is, because I'll have other cases. You only get one life.
Right. And so when we talk about what's currently happening in America, how does that, how does the reform, what does it look like to you? What do you think needs to be done? I mean, how do you view what's going on right now?
The best way for me to analogize this, Joe, is this. Imagine there being something with your faucet, right? And you keep changing the faucet and it's still not working. So that means what, Joe? That means you got to tear up the floor and replace the pipes. We continue to put pretty faucets on an issue that we know desperately. We need to tear up the floor, replace the pipes, make sure it's working before we put the floor back together and put another shiny faucet on. So when I look at what's going on right now, what we're dealing with right now is the leaky faucet for years because of what was been going on with the piping system. So here's a perfect example of that. For years, the economically and educationally poor neighborhoods have been neglected. Let's just be honest with that. When we look at the violence on our TVs, they happen in certain areas only. And when they don't happen in those areas is when they're a big deal to us as a society, like, oh my God, how could this happen? That same outrage should have been taking place in these impoverished areas. So now that we're here, we have to do the work and not try to gloss over. We have to repair our educational system in these areas. We have to place an emphasis on the Department of Corrections rehabilitating people and not simply just warehousing them. Because what it's creating is a merry-go-round of people who are picked up in impoverished areas, spending decades in prison, and then released ill-prepared for society back in those same impoverished areas. And so if we're looking to find a way to fix this thing, it's going to start with our educational system and our financial systems within these areas. That's really what we're talking about when we talk about systematic racism and inequality. This isn't just people out here making up excuses. And if you believe that, you're not ready to have an educated conversation about the historical neglect that has taken place for people of color in impoverished areas inside of not just Wisconsin, but the entire United States.
Right. And then lastly, Jarrett, what role do attorneys play in changing things? How can they play their part in making sure there's real change?
Yeah. Joe, that's a great question. I'm glad that you asked me that question because for one, I put this all on attorneys. And I'll tell you why. Our country was founded on litigators, by litigators, through litigation. The laws that are affecting us both negatively and positively, they were all litigated. They were all looked at. They were all placed on the books for a reason. So the problem that we have is we have a system that is set up. When I talk about systematic, it's set up all the way throughout different buckets in life, not just the criminal bucket. So when you look at the big law firms, name me one big law firm that is of color. You could probably name me some attorneys, but you're not going to be able to name me the big boys. I'm talking about, one of these big Skadden, one of these big firms that you think about. There isn't one, right? And when you don't have that, you don't have true equality. Don't come out and send donations with a checkbook, but then when you go back in your partner meetings, none of them look black or brown. That's the true issue. The true issue is this. You have people who have the power to change, but they're not the closest to the problem. It is those who are closest to the problem who are furthest away from the resources to change the problem. And that's truly falling on the doorstep of attorneys. And sometimes attorneys won't take a case unless there's money there. Sometimes attorneys take a pro bono case when it directly affects someone in and around them. But what about the young African-American male on the east side of Milwaukee, who knows that there is housing discrimination, who knows that there are financial banking discriminations that won't allow them to revitalize their own community? They don't have the power to litigate it because they cannot afford it. And if you look at the criminal justice system itself, it is a direct result of not being able to afford. Justice is for sale.
Jarrett Adams, thanks so much for speaking with us today.